All right, we are live. Hello, friends. Welcome to KCD Office Hours, your opportunity every Friday, most Fridays, to ask me questions, and I will do my best to answer. And I cannot always answer because I don't have all the experience in the world, but I do my best, and I will try to direct you somewhere that can help you at least. So let me share my screen, and yeah, so this is the Office Hours page, so you can learn more about it. There's the link to the Zoom is in here, and we also have the KCD Office Hours channel that you can come here in Discord to ask questions and stuff. So with that said, somebody just literally asked me when I will do Office Hours right now. Check the Office Hours channel. There we go. Okay, cool. So I always give priority to people who are actually in the Zoom call. And so if you're here, then you're welcome to ask. And then if you're not here, or if you have a question during the week and you want to ask during office hours and watch the recording later, that most people do that actually, I think, then you just put it in the Discord. So we'll start off with the folks who are here. Alyssa, I know that you have a question. Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. It's kind of long.
Yeah, I haven't yet. Do you? I'll just go ahead and read this, and then you can fill in with details.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll make sense.
Sure. So we've got a particular problem you're working on. New designs are displaying toast notifications. Some of the mocks call for conducting an operation and then navigating the user back to a more central page where the notification will be displayed. Okay, so I'm on a page, and then we navigate over here, and the thing pops up. Okay. This means the action to trigger the notification will happen in a child component, but we need to have the parent component display the message after the child component has been removed. Yep, makes sense. The design team wants to use the notification component within our UI library that accepts a lot of props for customization. I spoke with staff engineer on my team, and he suggested using context. So I've been investigating that approach. I know how to update the context state so that it displays the notification. However, I'm unsure of the best way to customize the component with this approach. If I was able to render the notification within the child component, I would just pass the desired props. However, since I'm using context, it would have to be stored as state. Is it a bad practice to store something in state that would have been passed in props in a different situation? Are there any design patterns that I could leverage other than that, or
Yeah,
yeah, in addition to context that you recommend? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I think I have a pretty good idea of the situation here.
Yeah.
What I would suggest is that you have a context provider, and that provider is responsible for rendering the component that does the notification that's all configurable and stuff, right?
Okay.
So that provider is up top. It basically never gets unmounted, and it can render multiple of those, right? Because you could have multiple toast notifications potentially. I think that is a very common use case. So what you would do is any consumers, or sorry, the context provider would actually expose a function that could be called. And so then any consumers will call that function with all the options that they want for the notification. And then up here, all that function does is it adds it to this array of notifications that should be currently visible. And that's stored in state. And then a use effect would set some sort of timer to say how long that notification should stick around. And so when that timer is all up, then in a set interval or something like that, then that context provider will actually remove that notification object from that array of notifications that should be visible. And then that notification whatever component would get unmounted. Kind of like some of this stuff is a little tricky when we're talking about animations and stuff, but most animation libraries should be able to manage that. It could be that your notification component manages when it should be visible and not, and so it's the one that's responsible. Yeah, that's very common. Yeah, for that, my question is how do I know with that design of the component, how do I know when I should when I'm safe to unmount it? Because the problem is that you could just pop up a bunch of notifications, and now you've got like 100 or 500 of those notification components being rendered, but they're not actually being displayed because they're responsible for when they should be removed. And you have no way to know when it's going to be removed. So they just stay there rendered, just not actually showing anything. And so what I'm saying is that design is flawed. And so there are two solutions to this. So first of all, the parent should be the one that's rendering that component. And then you should have an animation library that can say, when this is unmounted, then it needs to animate. And like Framer Motion does this, a lot of animation libraries do that, where they animate on mount and on unmount. That's the right approach. However, if you don't feel that you have the appetite or the time to adjust that design, or even like the buy-in, because like you're not working by yourself on this. If you can't do that, then another alternative is to make it so that the notification component can call a function in the parent that says, hey, I'm all done. And then the parent can be like, oh, okay, cool, I'll unmount you now. Right. That's another option there.
And I can kind of provide some context on like how that like notification component is like set up. Like they have like an option where you can click an X and it will close it. So like I could probably call that. And then there's also like you have like a prop that like you can essentially set the timer of how long you want it to render before it will disappear on its own. So I don't necessarily have to handle like, I think it's called like seconds to live or whatever. And it's like seconds. And so, yeah, so I think it sounds like I might be on the right track, because I was thinking, okay, I want that parent context, like said, to display it. And I just want, the child component, when it triggers the action, to show it, like to just let it know, hey, display at this time. And then it's just like kind of the customization stuff, because they let you like pass in things like JSX to what the component will look like in the body and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't want that to be stored in state, really. Like,
yeah, actually, yeah, that's totally fine to store in state. Let me
is it? Okay, I wasn't sure, because like, like I said, if I was just rendering on the child component, it would just pass it in as props, but I didn't know if it was a bad practice to do that or not.
No, you're totally good. Let me show you kind of the example of what I'm trying to, or what I would suggest. Just throw this in somewhere. Here we go. Just need somewhere where there's code. So you'd have your child component in here, and then maybe there's a button on click or something like that, right? Whatever. You have a place where code happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so in here, you're going to say, let's see, it'd probably be like a trigger toast, use toast,
okay,
or use trigger toast or something. And that would be provided by the parent provider, right?
Okay.
So this use trigger toast is going to be by the module that's responsible for this. It will just say, here's my context, React use context.
Yeah, and we follow we expose a hook from the context.
Yep. And then context dot trigger toast.
Okay.
Whatever, however you want to structure that. But like, so this would be in the parent component module. So you import this in all the consumers. Okay, so then you've got your trigger toast here. When you need to trigger the toast, then you call trigger toast. And here are your options. These are the props that you would pass to the notification.
Okay.
So it's like seconds to live is whatever. Yeah. And all like even the UI should be like div thing.
Yeah.
Like you could do all of that stuff, shove that in state. It's totally cool. Yeah, totally cool. No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, and then your toggle or toast provider is gonna expose that trigger toast. I think you understand this, but just in case anybody watching doesn't. Sure. So then we have our toasts, and this would be an array of toasts. And so then you'd say set toasts. Yep, basically that. And so then this would be your toast options. Yeah. So just add another one, and then it would return for all those toasts, map over the toast, and that's your toast component, and then pass those props. That's kind of the idea.
Okay. I think that, okay, gotcha. I think the thing that was hanging me up is that I was like not sure if, storing like said like the JSX and all that in state would be cool, like or not, like if it was bad practice or not to be doing that. Cause that's what, kind of the thought I was thinking. I was like, have the parent render the toast, and then have something trigger it. But I was like, but I need to customize it somehow. Cause I'd like to make it reusable so that, but okay. So it sounds like I can kind of do that then. I think that's kind of what I was thinking. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that threw me for a loop years ago with
Mhm.
state was there was this optimization back when we had class components.
Mhm.
You need to make sure that a context provider value doesn't change every render, and so
Right.
like passing a function in there or like
Mhm.
spreading an object, combining objects together in render, like it would mess things up. And so the solution Ryan Florence showed me was to just put the methods as property or as properties on state. So like functions that I needed my consumers to be able to call, I would just stick those in state. And I was like, what? That does not make any sense, but like it totally does. Just stick it in state. So from that point, I was like, yeah, you can put whatever the heck you want in there, and like it's fine. So yeah,
Okay.
totally sticking UI into something that ends up in state, no problem.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I just wasn't sure because I know I read. Yeah, I think in a PR like I was kind of storing stuff in state like that and kind of called it out. So it's like been like kind of I guess skittish around it, but that kind of makes okay. I couldn't think of another way to do it without passing it in this way. So
Mhm.
that makes sense. Cool. Thanks
Yeah,
for.
you're on the right track.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm glad you understood my question. I know it's kind of long, but
Yeah, no, you're good. And
okay.
just in case if this is useful at all, for reference, I'll pass the or send this along to you. I can't do TSX. What? Anyway, there you go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure thing. All right, Logan, you've had your hand up, nice and patient. How can I help?
Yeah, thanks so much. I don't have anything in the chat. I was just gonna read it out, but thanks
Sure.
again for holding these. These are awesome. I love what you do. So this is interesting. I wrote a lot out because it's complicated. So this is regarding jest and its use of common JS. Um, and this is regarding performance because of, I guess my example here is for something like material UI. If you were to import from the from @MUI/material at runtime in your jest code, it's going to actually import all of material stuff because it's common JS. Okay, so you fully understand that. Great. Um, Even though you may only want a button, right? Let's say you're rendering a React test with a button. So my question simply is there any way around this? Is there a resolver that exists to fix that sort of problem? Because and my question is not for material specifically. We have an internal UI library, but and then on top of that, material does have their way of exporting subpath export. They're using subpath exports, meaning the slash button in the import. Is that the solution? Hope that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah, good question. So first, it would we're talking about performance, so you always want to make sure that your what you want to optimize is actually a problem, because it may not be. I'm guessing that you have determined that already, but just for anybody listening, when you start talking about optimizing performance, just make sure the thing you're gonna fix is broken. So this can be a problem if you've just got a silly amount of modules that it needs to load. When in that case, what happens is like you'll require this module, which requires these 6 modules, and all of those require like 30 modules altogether, and then it just keeps going forever until you basically have required all the modules that are used in that system. So that can be problematic because it's not just doing the requiring of the modules, but it's also evaluating the top level of the modules. Typically, I actually think I have a blog post about this. Blog. So there is side effects. Is that? Nope, that is not it. What? Pure. There we go. Yeah, pure modules. You want to keep your modules pure, so I'll just stick that there. Which will make this less of a problem because even if you have like 1,000 modules, if they're not doing a lot other than just like requiring other things and exporting functions, then like that's probably okay. You'd have to have a lot of modules before that's a problem. But yeah, if your modules are doing a bunch of stuff like checking something on window or parsing some JSON thing or something like that, then yeah, you can run into these problems. And eventually, like, you can't have all of your modules in your application be completely pure, because like something's got to do something. Like you've got to trigger some sort of side effect at some point, even if it's just your entry that says, okay, render my app. But in a component library, that's typically not going to be a problem. Most of the time in the component libraries, you can at least have a setup function that you call to trigger side effects. And then just by importing the module, nothing happens. So I would suggest make sure that your modules are pure. They don't do anything just by importing them in general. So then assuming that we do have a performance problem here, what is the solution? Well, from a code splitting or tree shaking standpoint, CommonJS I think that there's a way to make Webpack and other bundlers able to tree shake CommonJS, but my guess is you're not authoring this in CommonJS. You're authoring this in ESM and then compiling it to whatever the bundler wants. In the case of Jest, because Jest doesn't currently support ESM very well, you're probably compiling that to CommonJS, and so you're going to have this problem in Jest. But let's just talk about the tree shaking problem first to kind of understand this a little bit. One thing that was pretty common early, like when we were starting to get into the tree shaking stuff, was we would say, hey, I want to import Lodash from Lodash, and now I can use Lodash to do like get and then foo and barb as buzz, right? So this is like really easy, handy library that allowed me to pull properties off of an object. This was before we had the Elvis operator and all the nice things that where we don't really need this thing anyway. Anyway, doing this would result in pulling all of Lodash, the entire library, into your application, which was like not awesome because it's very large. And so what you could do is you could do this get, this is not called destructuring, by the way. Looks like it, but it's not. This is called named import specifier. So you could do this, but even that, I don't think it really depends on the way that the module is structured on whether this will successfully tree shake or not. And so in Lodash's case, I think it would not. And so you could also do a /get. And now you're only grabbing that module, and any of its dependencies will also get pulled in. But like doing that is super annoying, especially if you are using like a ton of these. So like, let's say we also have, I don't know, is there a put? I haven't used Lodash in a long time. Yeah, like, or chain, or like, let's say you've got like a bunch of these that you're using. That's so stupid. I would hate to do that. And so I'd much rather just like, let me import Lodash and let the computer figure it out. And so that is what we did with Lodash, npm Lodash babel something, we'll figure it out. Yeah, I think this is it. So what this would do is it would compile this into those specific imports so that the computer would do it for you. This is a Babel plugin that you would include, and I think I included this by default in the PayPal scripts project that I built at PayPal because it's just so like such an easy win. And so this solved that problem, and it actually also would apply for Jest because Jest would run things through Babel before compiling everything. And so I actually did the same thing for one of our own things. I implemented the same Babel plugin, like a custom Babel plugin for one of our own component libraries, because it's not very complicated as far as Babel plugins go, and so it was worthwhile. And I feel like there was something else I was going to say. Yeah, so the intent was, let's get better tree shaking. The effect is that in CommonJS you actually are only importing like the specific imports, and that does solve the problem. So that might be an option for you, is to like build your own Babel plugin that does this, and this would come with the added benefit of Normally, companies that have component libraries have multiple apps that they're running. And so that component library is used by those apps, but not everything in the component library is used in every one of those apps. So it is actually nice to be able to tree shake the stuff that's not used per app. And so this would actually also help that as well. So I think it's a worthwhile thing if you are using Babel and you're not afraid to dive into building a Babel plugin, especially when you've got a reference like this. I haven't seen it in a while, so let me see as far as Babel plugins go, how complicated this is. Yeah, it looks like there's a fair bit of stuff going on here. Yeah, just kidding. It looks pretty complicated as far as Babel plugins go. But I mean, you could fork it and just change as little as possible, maybe. So not a small amount of effort, I think. The other option, of course, is to just manually do this, and that will also solve the problem. If you could actually more easily write a lint rule that says you are never allowed to import from the module itself. In fact, it wouldn't even have to be a lint rule. You can make a runtime thing that just like blows up if somebody imports from the module itself. So that's a way easier but less friendly DX way to solve this problem as well. But yeah, if you've got the appetite for it, then the Babel plugin is probably the best solution to this problem.
Yeah, so this is great. This is what I needed, but it does seem to only solve it for, let's just say, the internal library, right? But it won't solve it for material of these other things that I mentioned. So,
No.
I'm not going to go out writing Babel plugins for all those. So it seems that there's not a Jest or a Babel plugin for all of this to rewrite because every use case is different, obviously.
Yeah. Well, and frankly, this is wrong technically, right? Because if my source code says I want to import this underscore from Lodash, then I want that Lodash module to run, to execute. That's part of the idea. And the only reason that this is okay, this change that we're doing is okay, is because we know that Lodash doesn't have any side effects in the imports. And so it doesn't matter how many times they're imported, or I mean, they're only going to be imported or executed once, but like, it doesn't matter whether they're executed at all, because all they do is set up functions and export those. And so that's not going to have any side effects on the environment. But from a technical standpoint, generically, this is incorrect. And you should, this is not doing what the source code is saying it should do. It's just okay because we know that there are no side effects, and so it'll operate the same. And so that's why there's no general solution for this, because aside from the fact that like the modules would all have to be pure, we also don't have like a standard way of saying this function goes in this module and this function goes in that module. And so just the fact that this is called map and it maps to a module called map, that maybe it maps to something called, my map, or, it could map to anything. That's probably overloaded term there, but but yeah, so that's why there's no general solution to this. And you wouldn't want one because you could absolutely get in a bad situation anyway, which is, yeah, that's a pain. So again, I would say make sure that you really are having this problem before you dive into optimizing it. You should, like, your test should not be so impacted by importing a couple dozen modules. And the thing is that if you do have side effects in importing the modules, then you should not do this. You should not do the Babel plugin because now you actually are doing something that is different from what the source code says. So yeah, the main compelling reason for me to do this is for the tree shaking benefits in the other apps, and I think that makes this worthwhile. I would be surprised if you have so many modules that just importing them is your bottleneck for your Jest tests. But let's assume that you are. This is how you solve that problem.
Yeah, I mean, because I was here a couple months ago talking about slow Jest tests, and I figured out how to use the profiler, and then I recently got Wallaby JS, which lets you profile as well, which is pretty sick. But yeah, I'm just what I see in the flame graph, I think it's called, is the import stuff taking the most time. The
Really?
running the tests is just not really that fast. And we have React tests. I think individually it says 500 in this one app, and to do most of them takes about 97 seconds, which is pretty good. But there's one test where I think it's just bad practice. We're rendering kind of the whole app. We're making JS DOM render the whole component, and that one itself will take 120 seconds by itself. So I think that's where
Whoa.
we're just doing something wrong. But I've been really intrigued by this for months now, and I'm trying to dive into it more. But I don't know. I'm really trying to understand why these Jest tests are slow so that we can improve our CI times and that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. One thing that the 120 seconds is nuts. That's just one test.
It's one test file where it's constantly rendering like this
The whole
dashboard
app.
app. Yeah, which is,
Yeah, that's
I
pretty
think,
wild.
bad practice. But
Yeah, so I don't think it's necessarily a bad practice to render the whole app. With JS DOM, it is going to be a little slow. And you may investigate using Happy DOM, which is like a faster alternative to JS DOM. And maybe that will make it faster. But normally with those kinds of tests that are rendering the whole app, I will not have a lot of tests that do that. I'll try to do more in a single test, like follow more use cases. That the higher up the testing trophy or pyramid I go, the more my tests are doing. Each individual test is going to do. But anyway, a couple of thoughts that I had that may help is if you're seeing that the import of all the modules is the part that's taking the longest, you need to remember that part of that process is compiling on the fly. And there should be caching in place that should like, hey, the file hasn't changed. Let's not compile it on the fly. But maybe there's like something busted in the caching there. And another thing that you could consider is instead of using Babel to compile it, you could use esbuild or something like that, SWC, or something that's like way faster at compiling JavaScript, like outrageously faster. It's not so fast. And so that's another option that you could look into, is like maybe it's just the compilation of these JavaScript modules that's taking so long. And but yeah, if you get down to it and you're like, nope, it's caching properly, it should be pretty fast, then yeah, this would probably help. My guess is though that your bottleneck for that particular test is going to be JS DOM, for sure, and just rendering the whole app. You may be better served to move those tests over to a real browser, which will, the drawback of a real browser is like Cypress, is that your watch mode is not like all nice and integrated with your other tests, and it doesn't have the ability to only run the affected test based on what's changed. But if you're running the whole app, then you probably should run that test every time anyway. So there are definitely drawbacks. I like staying in Jest land as long as possible. But yeah, that's another potential option. So here are the options to sum it all up, what I've suggested. The first thing I would try is investigating Happy DOM and see if that just like magically speeds things up, because Happy DOM is still not going to be as fast as a real browser, but in my experience, it seems to be faster than JS DOM. So I investigate that first and see if that makes any meaningful impact. And there's a module for using Happy DOM with Jest and stuff, so it should be pretty fast. That's part of why I would do that first. And then I would investigate compiling with something other than Babel. This will not be possible if you have custom Babel plugins. So like you can knock that one out already if you are using a lot of custom Babel things. And I should also say that if you decide to go with esbuild or SWC for your tests, you should probably also do that for your entire build process. You don't want your tests and your build to be compiled differently, typically. So that would be the next thing I would investigate. And then then I might think I'd probably build this Babel plugin, like, because it's it's useful even outside of the context of a test. Like it's useful for your apps that are using the component library. So I might investigate the Babel plugin in any case. And then potentially moving those particular tests out of Jest into Cypress. That's probably the order I'd go in.
Okay, one more thing is still related to that while I have it here. Most of the problems I've seen with the tests that even run faster, it's usually when I do like yarn test, it's usually the time before I even start to see the test running is like 20 or 30 seconds. So does that
Wow.
help you indicate, is it compiling at the problem? I just can't understand it. I'm like, why is it taking so long just to begin the test?
Yeah, that's nuts. I think I have heard at least one person say they had that experience before. I never figured out why. I think it was just like in passing. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Kind of like right now. So yeah, I really don't know. I would expect the profiler should be able to tell you what it's doing during that time. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I've never seen anything like that myself. So I can't really give you any ideas. I do know that there is stuff going on, like it is doing stuff. So like it's finding all the test files, it's resolving your config. It's maybe you've got a weird plugin that's just like doing something strange. It is compiling your code. So like it could be that you just have a ton of modules. Like maybe something's importing something else that just ends up importing the world. You wanted a banana, you pulled the gorilla and the jungle or something. And so that sounds kind of likely, actually, that you just something what could easily be happening mistakenly is somebody's importing a module that ends up importing some server stuff that's intended for like server side, and now that's spidering out into like a bajillion other modules, and all of those are getting compiled, like even stuff in node modules, maybe that's getting compiled too, which would be a problem, or could lead to that problem. That might be it. And if you fix that, then you probably fix a couple other things too. So yeah, boy, fun stuff. You should definitely be journaling or writing out what you're learning as you're going through all of this, because I am positive you're not the only one experiencing these problems, and there's probably a lot of good learnings in what you're doing. So good luck.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, totally. Good luck, Logan. All right. Who else? We've got plenty of people in here. Who else has a question?
I've got one question
Sure.
in the Discord. Ken.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Let me take a look here. Right here. Okay. So trying to build a tool for UI copywriting web apps, actual words in the structure of the app, not the content. So far, I've been thinking of a GitHub app that traces certain phrases in the codebase and provides a non-code tool for members to change certain phrases in the app. So my first question, if you were to use such a tool, is that how you'd want it to function? Or would you do a pre-built script or SMT that pulls the changes phrases? Secondly, well, I'll answer this question first. I don't have any idea, honestly. I've never done anything remotely like this. So yeah, sorry, I don't know. Secondly, not sure how I'd trace back phrases from the bundled source code to its place in the code base. Played around with the source maps a bit. Yeah, I also have no idea. Yeah, so normally when you're dealing with this stuff, you're going to want to extract that to a separate file. And so then the source code is just like you've got this abstraction between the localization strings and the source code, where the source code calls that abstraction and that abstraction looks it up in this map. And what normally happens actually is that file will get loaded up on app boot time into some like in-memory thing. And then this little abstraction just finds the localization by its key. There are a bunch of abstractions for this. Probably the most widely used that I'm aware of is I18 Next. I18 stands for internationalization, I18N. So this is a pretty common practice for internationalization, but that's probably what I would do for your use case as well. And that way, you've got the like phrases and stuff that are actually coded. So people say, this is the phrase, like this is the name of this phrase. And it's like, welcome phrase or whatever. So like if I were to do that for my own website, like my homepage, I'd have a key in my localization thing that says like homepage.mission statement or whatever. And so then people would just be making changes to that. Where am I? There we are. Yeah, and that way you wouldn't have to do any fancy like extracting different phrases and stuff. But maybe this is not exactly what you're trying to accomplish. I could be misunderstanding you.
That's almost it. I'm just wondering if, because I don't want to do it on runtime. I definitely want to do it on build time.
Sorry, you cut in and out, but you said you don't want to do this at runtime. You want it at build time. That's fine. You can do it at build time. So you would build this. You would have those localization files, and then at build time you would save those as like JSON or something, and then at runtime you just require them. So that's actually what like any SSG app does that exactly, or even a client rendered app typically does this. There have been projects in the past that would use a Babel plugin where you would put your localization strings in the JSX, and then the Babel plugin would extract those into localization files so that the people who are localizing the app just are working with those files directly, and then you as the developer just like you're writing regular English or whatever in the code, and then the Babel plugin just pulls stuff out for the localizer. So like there's also that as well, but that all happens at build time. And so in fact this was like early days when for me you would actually build multiple versions of the app. So each localization would have its own built version. So those localization strings would actually get built into the source code. So by the time you had the output, you had like a build that had just the strings itself, as if that was the source code. And you'd have like 13 builds for every language you supported. It's kind of wild how that worked. And then you'd have like some sort of Nginx config or something that would point to which build it was supposed to go to. I never did it, but people told me that's what they were doing. I was like really amazed. Anyway, that probably doesn't help you much. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that I probably wouldn't personally pursue just finding phrases So what you're saying is you want somebody to be able to pull up the app. They choose a part of the, like, let's say we're on my page, they choose this and they make a change to it, and then it like rebuilds the app or something with their change.
Or it just like makes a pull request. And yeah, I did want to have sort of like a keeper value for words. So it's not like free for all. It has to be something that's already keyed, but then they can change it and then make it PR or something.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, you would absolutely do it that the way that I was describing. And I think that like there are CMSs that have this functionality. And I'm not sure exactly how they do it, but because I'm not in the CMS world at all. Like I've never used a CMS other than like the self-built one at PayPal. And so I have limited experience with this, but yeah, I'm pretty sure you should be able to just have the key value thing. You have a file that has all the localization strings. They click on this, they make a change to it. What your thing is responsible for is looking up what that the key is somehow. I'm not sure exactly how you do that. It could be that your what you have is a component that is responsible for listening to those changes or something like that, and so it does know what the ID is, and so when those changes are made and they hit submit or whatever, that component submits to your backend that says here's the key and here's the value, the new value, and then your backend is like, okay, sweet, let me go look that up in their localization file and make the change and make the PR or whatever. That should totally be possible. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that. In fact, just to give you an idea what I mean, we've got our translation, and it takes a prop called ID. And then it, it's like translate, use translate by ID or whatever it's going to be called. It's probably not translate, but anyway, then it would return, maybe a span that has the translate by ID or whatever. I don't know, whatever it is. And then you'd have some sort of event handler, like, or like you could either have an event handler, or you could say data translate ID is the ID. And then you could have like a global event handler that would be stupid because React already does event delegation. So I'd probably just put the event handler right here. You'd say, on whatever, I'm not sure how you'd do that. But then, here's the fetch, fetch whatever, and here's my method is post, and my body is the ID and the new content, whatever it is. I think you get the idea, hopefully. Does that make sense?
I'll come back and watch. I think I will.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much.
There are a lot of problems with this code, but yeah, that's like definitely pseudocode there.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. Anybody else? We've got a lot of people in here. Cynthia, I should mention, I'm probably taking too long in these questions, but I do have a hard stop at 10:30. So I will endeavor to be a little faster. And also I'll mention since I'm talking about time constraints and stuff, if you're like, Kent's not going to be able to get to my question or something, I do have the Call Kent podcast, and you could record your question right here and ask it to me here, and then I will answer it, and it will go into this list. We're getting actually pretty close to 100 episodes of that, which is going to be exciting. So anyway, so if you do have a question and you think it could be answered over audio, then maybe save it for the Call Kent podcast instead. Okay, Cynthia, go ahead.
Hey, Ken, thanks for everything you're doing. I have a question I think right up your alley. So we have two NPM packages that we internally use. One, we call it packet. All it does, it has our shared components and hooks. And next package we use internally is our lightly modified React scripts. So the first one, we published our shared components. They all written in TypeScript. We publish them as they are to the NPM. We don't transpile down to JavaScript or anything else. We just publish as they are. And then our custom React script includes the Webpack and Babel config to transpile our shared package. We initially did this to help with npm link and all those things because our library is not mature enough. While we are working on an app where we need to modify a component or we need to add a new component, our hope was we just do npm link and make sure everything works, test pass, and then commit that to both and bring the shared package into the consuming micro app and move on. But npm link doesn't work. I'm not sure why. I feel like before we used to, without using npm link, we were able to modify things in the node modules folder and then see that change reflect. Now those things seem to be cached. So I'm wondering what is the recommended approach here when you have a shared npm package that you want to regularly modify and add features to it, at least the earliest stage. What is the best way to go about doing it?
Yeah, good question. So I can think of a couple of reasons why npm link is not working for you. And first I'll also say that like npm link has historically been hard to use and sometimes doesn't work because of that. But there are a couple of common gotchas with linking packages like that. One is, especially since it's written in TypeScript, you could be like changing the source file and you've got it linked. And And changing the source file is not going to change what's being imported by the app, right? Because the app is importing the built files. So first of all, you just need to make sure that when you're changing that source file, you have a watcher that is building to update the built files, so that the app that is linking to it will get the updated built files. Secondly, if a module has already been required, and then that module source code is changed, the next module that requires that will get a cached version. Like, this is just the way Node works. It will get a cached version of that module rather than going and evaluating that script again, which is very good behavior. We would be in big trouble if that's not how it worked. But because that's the way that it works, if this is like server-side stuff, you may need to purge the require cache, which is basically delete require cache at path to module. And we actually do this in Remix to get not exactly hot reloading on the server, but like sort of. This also leads to other funny things. There are trade-offs there, but that's another thing to consider, is that, like, yeah, Node actually has this require cache that it's keeping. So even if you update the dist directory, if your app is still running when that happens, then it will never pick that up. And then the next thing is that Webpack and Babel and all these tools are configured to cache the compiled version of stuff that's in Node modules. And it does not care about what, like, it never checks whether those files have changed, because they assume that Node modules will be stable, which is probably a pretty good assumption. And if they didn't make that assumption, then the caching would be less effective anyway. And so I don't think they even check to see whether that file has been changed or not. And so you will also be required to purge the Webpack or Babel cache, which typically, I'm not sure where they put those files anymore. I think it's in a .cache directory in the Node modules directory or something like that. So you may need
you're right.
Yeah, you may need to delete that folder. In addition to, like, all the other things I said, like, so there are a lot of reasons why you may not be picking up the latest version of the changes. So and then of course even if you restart the server, you may also need to delete that cache.
Yeah, that's what I end up doing it. So I don't necessarily in love with what the current setup. So I was trying to get into the hacky world of trying to add module resolve links to Webpack and create a symbolic link to the folder we have inside the source directory. Then I ended up thinking, like, all these things are a bit wacky, and it's not a unique problem to me. So since you maintain your KCD React scripts, what is your suggested solution? How would anyone go about doing it?
How did I ever do that? What I typically have done in the past is here's the right solution. Use a tool that, or use a monorepo. This is the eventual destination for everybody who's trying to do this sort of thing. It just drastically simplifies things, apparently, while complicating many other things, but it definitely solves this problem. So you could, whether it's NX or Turbo repo or whatever, these tools are intended to solve this specific problem. When I was at PayPal, we actually used Lerna for our component library. For PayPal scripts, as well as for KCD scripts, those were in an individual repo. And what I did for that was I had a directory called like example or something that just used a bunch of the features. And I had to do some wacky things to make it resolve to the right packages and stuff, but it ended up working. And actually what I would do is I wonder if I'm doing it in KCD scripts. Let me see. Because it'd be way easier to show you than explain it. So nope, I'm not doing it in here. That's too bad. So in here, I actually have a bunch of jest tests and snapshots and stuff for some of this stuff. It's kind of interesting. I'm not super thrilled with how it all works, but it works. So yeah, so I had like an example app directory that would in the package JSON. Actually, you know what? Hold on. One last, I might be doing this in Remix because we have our playground. No, that's not.
There's examples folders, a couple of.
Yeah, the example folder in this, we're just like actually installing the actual version or like a published version of Remix. So it's not quite the same. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, just use a mono repo tool, man. That's like it's the right way to do it. But what I did was in the example directory, I would have like an example app, and then in the package JSON, instead of PayPal scripts, I would run node and then .. whatever the path to the bin was. But I would actually use the source code, and I would have a -- require to like a Babel register. Now these days I'd probably do ESBuild register, so it's a lot faster. But that would actually run the source code and compile on the fly. So there was no concern about the caching stuff, no concern about needing to run the build. And that actually worked pretty well, but it certainly felt pretty hacky. So anyway, I think the right course of action here is to use an actual monorepo tool. So
thank you.
Yeah, good luck. And I should mention that if you decide to use a monorepo tool, that does not necessarily mean all of your projects need to go into there. That would just mean that you've got one package is the one that you're working on, and then another package is just like an example app, and then the monorepo tool can help those communicate properly. And I think even like NPM has a workspaces thing. I'm not sure how well it works. I use it for my Remix workshops, and it works really well for that. And I just use it to hoist all the dependencies and stuff. But I'm pretty sure it can be used to like import the built files between projects. You still have to have like it's importing the built files still. But anyway, okay, cool. Yeah. Again, I take too long on these questions or on answering these. I'm just very long-winded. Who else in the Discord has a question, or should I go to, or sorry, in the Zoom, or should I go to the Discord?
I have a question.
Yeah. Hi, Daniel.
Hey. Do you mind if I share my screen? Because I have
sure.
Just some
Go for
stuff up. So this came up in a PR, and am I sharing the right screen? You see my Twitter and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. So this came up in a PR with like use effect dependencies.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been pretty strict with myself on this. And so you can see that like count is missing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was trying to give some feedback on a PR, and I was like, well, the reason to not do that is because count will be stale.
Mm-hmm.
And then my coworker was like, but it's not. And I was like, no, it would be. And then so I had to go like test it out, and it's not. Like it's never stale. So then it just kind of like led to this conversation about like, well, then what's wrong with this if that's not stale?
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of two parts to the question, and I know we don't have a ton of time left. So, but one is sort of like, is it super important to like always follow that rule? And the other one is more of like a people problem kind of question, is like, as a team, how strict do you get with that when like it works perfectly fine? Like it's not stale and it works. It does exactly what you want. And if you added that to it, it would no longer do what you want. And like, but then like if you get in the habit as a team of just like, disabling the let rule or having all these errors in your app, like that's not good either. Right. So I just didn't know if you had any thoughts on that. And I tweeted it, Dominic here, and he just linked to like some beta docs that like basically describe exactly the problem and then point to like the use event hook that doesn't exist yet. So I
Mhm.
just thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
I have lots of thoughts on this. The fact is that this is working on accident. Right? So the reason that it technically works is so count is not going to be stale. That's not the problem here. Count will be current because that function is going to get created every time we render, because just the way JavaScript works, it runs the function again. We're making a new effect, and use effect will always call the latest one. So we're not going to have a stale problem. What we could have is if count gets updated, then that use effect will not run. However, if foo gets updated, it will. The fact is that the way that this is written, foo will get updated when the count is updated, and so it's working on accident. So the fact that foo gets updated whenever count is updated, that's why our use effect is running whenever the count gets changed.
That's actually not true in this app. Just I kind of set it up on purpose this way. I can increase count and it's not changing foo until I hit this link, and then it runs.
Yeah, that's great. But this also shows that use effect will not run when the count is updated separately from foo. So this use effect will only run when foo is updated. And typically in actual practice, if you are using a value in your use effect, what use effect is supposed to do is it says, I've got some state of my app and there's some side effect that needs to run when that state changes. And so if you don't include all of the things that can change in your effect dependencies, then that side effect is going to get stale. So let's say that every time count changes, you need to update the database to tell it what the change is, right? So if you don't include the count in the dependency array, now the database is out of date, right? So now it's stale. That's what I mean when I say stale there. Now, if what you actually want is, let's say that you have a UI like this and you say, I can change the count as many times as I want, but I have this other button that says commit that count. So like you have some like in progress changes, and now let's persist those changes or something like that. So if that's what you're looking for, then actually the use event seems actually like a pretty solid solution to that. But use event is actually just an implementation of the latest ref pattern, which I have blogged about on the Epic React blog. So if you go epicreact.dev/articles, you'll find the latest ref pattern in there. But basically what that involves right now, before you have use event, is a ref that will just keep the latest value of whatever it is you want. So in this case, you'd have a ref for the count. And then you would use countref.current to access whatever the latest ref is. And so if I were to rewrite this code to be safer, then I would make a ref for the count. And then whenever foo changes, I would console.log countref.current. And that would keep it in line with the rules of ESLint. It would also like communicate the actual intent here. And then you'd be able to avoid people disabling your ESLint rules and stuff. And if I were building this today, that's exactly how I would do it. I would not disable the ESLint rule. I feel like there are situations where disabling the ESLint rule are warranted, but this is certainly not one of them. So that's, yeah. As far as like the social stuff, because the code that you'd end up with when you're all done is definitely more complicated than this, for sure, 100%. But the reason why I would go with the more complicated version, it's not a lot more complicated, it's just like maybe 3 additional lines. But the reason I would go with that is because as soon as you disable the ESLint rule, you can very easily shoot yourself in the foot by adding another thing in your use effect callback that you forget to include in the dependency array that actually absolutely needs to be there. And so I would rather add a couple extra lines of code than disable that ESLint rule. There are times where the ESLint rule is wrong and you just ignore it, but that's very, very rare. And I can't even think of an example right now. I just know I've done it before. So yeah, anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that there's more to say, but we're at time. So yeah, that makes sense.
If you have a follow-up, feel free to come back next week or ask on the Call Kent podcast. Happy to continue on that.
Okay. Yeah, it's just like that there's times when like it's not just 3 more lines. It's like 15 more lines to get it to work, you know? And
Well,
then you're talking
so
to a
what-
coworker and they're like, but it works perfectly fine just like this.
Yeah.
It's actually super simpler to do it like that. And you know, that's kind of
Yeah, the latest ref pattern itself is like 3 lines. It really is. It's all it is
Okay.
is create the ref, have a use effect that updates the ref, and that's it. And then instead of using the actual value, you just always use the ref instead.
Yeah,
And
okay.
that's all that the latest ref pattern will require. But yes, if you decide, oh well, we're gonna memoize this, yeah, now that starts adding up on the lines, and the complexity, for sure. And there are good arguments for doing that in some cases too. But I'll just go ahead and plug Remix, and I do not have to memorize stuff nearly like I don't know if I even have a use memo. Here's my my app in for my, I'm not showing my screen, I know, but what is the app? The workshop app that I've got for Remix. And I do have one use memo. It's for a reusable hook. And other than that, like the app code that I write never needs anything like use memo or use callback, period. It's amazing. I freaking love Remix. The reason why it's showing up a million times is because I've got the same copy of the app like 20 times in here. But yeah, only one use memo, and it's pretty dang simple anyway. Okay, cool. So anyway, thanks, Daniel. If you do have any follow-up or anything, I'm happy to. If your coworker is like, yeah, but that's stupid, then we can talk some more later.
Yeah, well, no, it's not like a you know, a bitter argument or anything. It just kind of like the reason that I gave to not do it, like we immediately proved wrong, and I was like, well, now what's my argument for not doing that? You know, like, yeah.
Cool. All right, sweet. Anybody else in the Zoom call have a question? Oh, we're over time. Shoot, I do have to go. Dang it. And I just talked too much. It's my fault. Sorry. I know that there are quite a few people who are in here who probably still in the Zoom who wanted to ask a question. So I apologize for that. If you need your question sooner, then the Call Kent podcast is definitely the way to get an answer sooner. I will come back next week, and starting up right around somewhere around here, I will get to your questions next week. Sorry that I just wasted, or I didn't waste time. I answered questions. It was great. We had a good time. We just like had a lot of things to say, I guess. So anyway, thank you everybody for coming. And I'll double check next week. Yeah, should be totally good. So we'll see you all next week. Bye.